When the ocean strikes back, even the calmest waves can turn deadly. From yacht parties and yoga classes to flyboarding stunts and oil rig shifts, these encounters illustrate how quickly fun on the water can turn into a fight for survival. Great whites, tiger sharks, and bull sharks, guided by light, motion, and sound, prove that curiosity and hunger blur beneath the surface. No dive, no swim, no celebration is ever truly safe. In this video, we'll dive into shocking real-life shark encounter stories. On the evening of October 31st, 2025, the waters near Gansby, South Africa, shimmered under a pale orange sky as the sun began to set. A luxury yacht drifted near the seal colonies that dotted the coast, its decks decorated for a Halloween celebration. Music played softly from the speakers, and 5 friends, all in colorful costumes, laughed and took photos as the sea glowed gold beneath them. Among them was Jason Meyer, a young photographer known for his adventurous spirit, and his closest friends, Ethan, Carla, Leah, and Marcus, each drawn by a love for the ocean and a shared desire to make the most of their holiday. Jason had always been fascinated by the sea. He spent his childhood near these same waters, learning how unpredictable they could be. Yet, surrounded by his friends and the warm colors of the evening, the ocean seemed harmless, almost welcoming. The group moved about the deck, raising glasses and pointing cameras toward the nearby rocks, where seals splashed and barked in the fading light. Their laughter mixed with the sound of waves against the hull. None of them noticed the faint shadow circling below the surface. As night approached, the air grew cooler, and the yacht's lights glowed brightly in the darkness. The flicker of colored bulbs danced across the waves, reflecting like sparks on black glass. Somewhere deep below, movement stirred. A massive shape, silent, steady, and ancient, rose through the depths. It was a great white shark nearly 20 feet long, drawn by the vibration of music, the flickering lights, and the scent of nearby prey. The ocean around the boat seemed calm, but beneath it, danger moved closer. The first impact came suddenly. The hull shook violently, sending glasses crashing to the ground and causing people to stumble. The laughter stopped. Another strike followed, harder than before, splintering the wooden rails at the yacht's edge. Jason caught himself on a railing as the vessel rocked under the heavy force. A low creak echoed through the structure, followed by a spray of seawater that drenched the deck. Confusion turned to panic as the shadow beneath the surface grew larger. The shark rammed the yacht again, tearing away a piece of the stern. Equipment, decorations, and even a few of their props slid into the water. Ethan and Leah leaned over instinctively, trying to grab what they could, but the predator struck again, bursting upward with terrifying speed. In one explosive moment, water erupted around them. The 3 closest to the edge, Ethan, Leah, and Marcus, were thrown overboard. The sea boiled with motion as the shark lunged, its jaws clamping down with crushing power. Jason and Carla screamed for help, grabbing poles and oars as they tried to reach their friends, but the shark's tail swept through the water, striking debris and dragging its victims beneath the surface. The yacht rocked violently in the chaos. Jason's camera, still flashing, tumbled into the water, its light flickering one last time before vanishing into the dark. The sea churned with foam and blood as Jason and Carla clung to the shaking yacht, their bodies trembling from cold and fear. The waves slapped hard against the broken sides of the vessel, each one threatening to pull them into the same dark water where their friends had vanished. The great white shark circled below, its massive shape just visible in the flickering reflections of the deck lights. Every few seconds, a fin cut the surface, silent and menacing, leaving ripples that spread wide across the sea. Carla's hand slipped on the wet railing as the boat tilted again. A piece of debris floated past, part of a costume, torn and red-stained. Jason's mind spun, every second stretched by the terror of not knowing what would surface next. He could hear the faint hum of the yacht's engine still running, though parts of the structure were breaking apart. The music had stopped. Only the sound of water filled the air now. Suddenly, the shark surged upward once more, striking the side of the hull with brutal force. The metal groaned as it tilted sharply, nearly throwing them both into the sea. Jason grabbed a pole and thrust it downward, his arms burning as the impact sent vibrations through the deck. The predator twisted below, its tail sweeping through the water and sending a wave across the bow. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment everything went black. When power returned, the water around the yacht had gone still again. Jason scanned the surface, but there were no signs of movement, only floating wreckage and dark patches spreading outward. The sea that had looked calm just an hour earlier now carried the remains of a celebration turned into horror. The shark had vanished into the deep, leaving the survivors trembling under the dim glow of the damaged vessel's emergency lights. They stayed frozen for what felt like hours before help finally arrived. A nearby fishing boat, drawn by the distress signal, found them adrift in the middle of the night. Jason and Carla were pulled aboard, exhausted, covered in salt water and streaks of blood that were not all their own. Searchlights scanned the waves, but nothing living appeared. Only fragments of the yacht floated on the surface, shredded fabric, splintered wood, and a few scattered personal items slowly sinking beneath the waves. When rescuers finally reached the harbor at dawn, the wind was cold and the sky heavy with low clouds. News spread quickly about the incident off Gansby. Experts analyzed the pattern of damage on the yacht and confirmed that a great white had been responsible, likely provoked by the flashing lights, vibrations, and movement near a seal colony. Marine biologists explained that such predators often respond aggressively when confused or stimulated by irregular activity in their hunting zones. Days later, the wrecked remains of the yacht were recovered and towed to shore. Jason stood nearby, silent, watching as workers lifted the broken pieces from the water. The laughter, the music, the flashing lights, all had vanished, leaving only the echo of that night. The sea had returned to calm, but its memory lingered. The tragedy became a grim reminder to those who ventured too close to the wild that beneath the beauty of the ocean lived power and instinct no human could ever truly control. On June 17, 2023, the waters of the Great Barrier Reef shimmered under a bright Australian sun. Mia Lawson, a 28-year-old adventure enthusiast, balanced on her flyboard, hovering several feet above the turquoise sea. Ever since childhood, Mia had loved the ocean. She grew up near the Queensland coast, spending most of her free time surfing, diving, or swimming through coral lagoons. Her daring nature led her into extreme water sports, and she eventually gained online recognition for capturing breathtaking underwater footage of her stunts. That morning, she set out to record a new video for her social media followers, testing her flyboard over shallow reef waters. The setup seemed perfect. The sea was calm, the coral reef below glowed with color, and her instructors waited nearby on a jet ski. The machine roared as streams of water lifted her into the air, leaving a spiral of foam in its wake. The thrill of flight filled her chest. She moved smoothly at first, spinning and dipping through misty arcs of spray, unaware of what was gliding silently below. The reef was alive with fish, turtles, and other marine creatures, but hidden in the shadow of the coral shelf, a much larger form had begun to stir. The sound of the water jets, the flashes of light on the metal fittings, and the fast, jerky movements had caught the attention of a tiger shark. Over 12 feet long, the predator had been cruising along the reef edge, drawn by the unusual vibrations in the water. Its wide head turned upward, eyes locking onto the shape hovering above. With a slow flick of its tail, it began to rise, its stripes shifting like shadows across its sleek body. Mia, focused on maintaining balance, noticed nothing at first. The waves below rippled strangely, but she thought it was from the jet stream. Then, in one sudden burst of motion, the shark surged upward. The massive body sliced through the surface, its snout brushing her leg and throwing her off balance. The contact was hard and fast, sending a jolt of fear through her body. The flyboard dipped sharply, and for a split second she was only inches above the water. Her instructors shouted and raced toward her, guiding the jet ski closer. The shark turned in a wide arc, circling with steady precision. It brushed the board again, testing, its curiosity turning into powerful movement. One of the instructors struck the water with a dive stick, creating sharp vibrations that startled the animal. The shark hesitated, twisted, and then glided away toward deeper water. Mia's leg burned where the rough skin had scraped her wetsuit. She steadied herself, shaking from the adrenaline, as the sea slowly grew calm again. The ocean, which had moments ago felt like freedom, now felt unpredictable and alive in a far more dangerous way. The sound of the jet ski engine faded as the water settled into uneasy silence. Mia clung to the edge of the board, her breath quick and uneven. The sunlight reflected off the tiny ripples spreading outward where the shark had vanished. Her instructors kept a close watch, circling carefully and scanning the water for any sign of movement. Beneath the surface, shapes shifted faintly, but the predator was gone, leaving only a faint cloud of sand rising from the reef below. The once clear ocean now felt heavy, its calm surface hiding unseen depths that seemed to watch and wait. They guided her toward the waiting boat, keeping the flyboard steady until she was pulled onto the deck. Her wetsuit was torn along her calf, the fabric frayed where the rough skin of the shark had grazed her. Beneath it, her skin was scraped and red, small cuts marking where the impact had brushed bone. The crew helped her sit, wrapping a towel tightly around the injury. Her hands trembled, though she tried to steady them, still processing what had happened. The realization of how close she had come settled slowly, heavier than the sting of her wounds. Around the boat, the sea glittered innocently once more, waves rising and falling with gentle rhythm. Yet to those who had witnessed the moment, the beauty felt deceptive. The instructors moved quietly, retrieving floating gear and resetting equipment. One of them tapped the flyboard's controls, shutting it down completely. The faint hum of the jets stopped and the reef returned to silence. Even the fish had retreated into crevices, as though the entire ecosystem had sensed the disturbance. Minutes passed before Mia spoke again, her breathing finally steady. She looked toward the horizon where the deep blue met the sky, still trying to understand the sudden shift from excitement to near disaster. The Great Barrier Reef had always been a place of wonder to her, a living museum filled with color and movement. But that morning it had revealed another side, its hidden strength, its untamed nature, its reminders that humans were guests here, never in control. When they reached the shore, paramedics were waiting at the dock. They cleaned her wounds and bandaged her leg. The abrasions were minor, yet the doctors insisted she rest for a few days. Reporters later contacted her, curious about the rare close encounter. Mia avoided most interviews, only confirming that she had been lucky. Behind her quiet words, however, was the deeper truth. She had felt the weight of nature's power up close, and it had changed something inside her. Marine specialists later studied her footage and noted how the reflections from her gear and the rapid splashing likely drew the shark's attention. Experts explained that tiger sharks often respond to unpredictable movement, mistaking it for wounded prey, or exploring it out of curiosity. The event quickly gained attention in local news, sparking discussions about safety during extreme water sports in areas with high predator populations. For Mia, the experience became a turning point. She continued her ocean adventures, but with a new awareness of balance and respect. Each time she stood on her board afterward, she remembered the massive shadow that had risen from below, a reminder that beauty and danger can exist in the same breath. The sea still called to her, but she answered now with caution, knowing that unseen eyes always watched its wonders beneath the surface. On February 14, 2025, the sky over Port Lincoln, South Australia, was painted gold by the late summer sun. The sea was calm, with small waves breaking gently on the sand. 12-year-old Ethan Parker and his younger sister Lily were spending the afternoon with their parents at a family beach picnic. Ethan, full of restless energy, loved the water more than anything else. He had been learning to surf, while Lily preferred to build sandcastles and collect shells near the edge of the tide. Their parents watched from a short distance, chatting and laughing, unaware that the calm beauty of the day would soon give way to horror. Ethan had always been playful, teasing his little sister in harmless ways. As Lily walked along the shallows, letting the foamy waves touch her feet, Ethan sneaked behind her and gave her a quick push into the water. She fell forward with a splash, startled but unharmed. Ethan laughed, splashing the surface while Lily tried to stand again in the swirling foam. The sound of their laughter echoed across the beach, mixing with the calls of distant gulls. Not far from the shore, hidden beneath the green-blue water, an enormous great white shark glided silently. Nearly 18 feet long, it had been following a small colony of seals that often hunted along the reef nearby. The shark was drawn to the vibrations and splashing that echoed through the water. Its instincts sharpened, its movements grew faster, and its sleek shape cut through the shallows with quiet precision. The children's movements caught its attention. The water rippled faintly, then stilled. Suddenly, a dark shadow rose beneath Lily, breaking the surface in a burst of foam and power. The great white lunged, clamping its jaws around her leg with crushing force. The sea erupted in chaos as water turned red, waves thrashing wildly around the small figure caught in the predator's grip. Ethan froze for a moment, stunned by what he saw. Then panic took over. He rushed toward his sister, trying to pull her free as the massive shark shook her side to side. The creature's strength sent water spraying in all directions, its tail slicing through the surf like a blade. Every movement sent shock waves through the shallow tide, churning sand and foam together. Lifeguards stationed further down the beach spotted the commotion and sprinted toward the water. Ethan's terrified cries carried over the sound of the waves. Two rescuers plunged in, fighting against the current as the shark made another violent turn, dragging Lily deeper into the water. One lifeguard swung a rescue board against the predator's head, and for a moment, it released its hold, circling just beneath the surface before retreating into the darker depths. The rescuers pulled Lily onto the sand, her brother still clutching her hand as sirens began to wail in the distance. What had started as an ordinary summer afternoon had turned into a scene of chaos and fear. The beach fell silent except for the crashing waves and the cries of gulls circling overhead. The lifeguards worked quickly on the sand, their hands trembling as they tried to stop the bleeding from Lily's leg. Ethan knelt nearby, his small hands covered in seawater and sand, eyes wide with disbelief. His mother rushed toward them, falling to her knees beside her daughter, while his father ran to signal the ambulance that was speeding toward the beach. The soft hum of laughter and chatter that had filled the shore only minutes earlier was gone, replaced by quiet shock and the heavy sound of sobbing carried by the wind. Lily's skin had turned pale, her breath shallow as rescuers wrapped her in towels and used bandages to stop the bleeding. Ethan sat still, unable to move, his mind filled with the image of the huge shadow rising from beneath the water. Every time he blinked, he saw it again. The burst of foam, the red tide, the moment the ocean swallowed his sister from view. The rescue helicopter arrived soon after, its blades whipping sand into the air. Medics lifted Lily onto a stretcher, rushing her toward the waiting aircraft. Ethan tried to follow, but a lifeguard gently held him back, guiding him toward his mother, whose shaking hands clutched at him tightly. At the hospital in Port Lincoln, doctors worked tirelessly. For hours, the family waited in silence, sitting side by side in the cold waiting room. Outside, the sun began to set, the same ocean light that had sparkled that morning now fading into shadow. Despite all efforts, the injuries proved too severe. The bite had torn deep into muscle and bone, leaving no chance for recovery. When the doctors finally stepped out, the world seemed to come to a standstill. The sound of the sea, the cries of the birds, and even the whispers of the wind seemed to vanish, leaving only stillness. The news spread quickly through the small coastal town. Locals who knew the family visited the beach the next day, leaving flowers and seashells near the lifeguard stand. A wooden cross was placed in the sand, surrounded by candles that flickered in the soft morning breeze. Surfers and swimmers stood together, heads bowed in silence, the waves gently lapping at the shore as if in mourning too. Marine experts later reviewed the event, explaining that the area had been close to an active seal colony. The shark had likely mistaken the child's movements for struggling prey, drawn by splashing in the shallow surf. It had not been a targeted attack, but a moment of instinct triggered by sound and motion. Yet that understanding did little to comfort the family. The sea that had once been a place of play and laughter now carried only grief. Weeks passed, but the memory did not fade. Ethan stopped visiting the beach, unable to face the sight of the water that had taken his sister. His parents rarely spoke. Their home was quiet except for the soft sound of the ocean in the distance. The waves that once promised peace now seemed endless, whispering of what was lost. What began as a simple act of childhood mischief had ended in unthinkable tragedy, a painful reminder of how fragile joy can be when nature decides otherwise. On August 12, 2021, the morning sun rose over the Gulf of Mexico, casting a golden hue on the waves around the towering structure of an offshore oil rig. The air was humid, heavy with salt, and the faint sound of machinery echoed across the open sea. Ethan Ramirez, a 36-year-old maintenance technician, had worked on rigs for nearly a decade. He was known for his calm attitude and steady focus, someone who could handle long hours above and below the waterline. Growing up near the Texas coast, he had always been comfortable around the ocean, never fearing its depths. But that day, the calm routine of his work would take a terrifying turn. The morning had started like any other. The crew moved through their daily checks, tightening bolts, inspecting pipes, and monitoring gauges. Ethan's task was to examine a metal ladder that extended just beneath the water's surface, a small but crucial piece of equipment used during maintenance. The sea below was calm but cloudy, its greenish tint hiding whatever moved beneath. As Ethan leaned over the edge, one hand gripping the rung and the other checking for corrosion, the silence of the water suddenly broke. Without warning, a sharp, forceful jolt struck the ladder, sending vibrations through his arms. Before he could react, a dark, muscular shape burst from the water. A bull shark, nearly 10 feet long, lunged upward, its jaws clamping briefly onto his lower leg. Pain shot through Ethan's body as the predator's teeth tore through his boot and into his flesh. He kicked out instinctively, twisting his body, trying to break free from the crushing grip. The shark released him for a moment, disappearing into the murky water below. Blood drifted into the sea, coloring the surface around the ladder. Ethan gritted through the pain, gripping the metal tightly as the ladder swayed. Then came another strike, faster and more violent. The shark's head slammed against the metal, its mouth snapping at his boot again, scraping along his calf and leaving deep gashes. Water churned with foam and bubbles as the animal circled back, drawn by motion and sound. Above, his co-workers saw the chaos unfold. They rushed toward the edge, shouting and waving, swinging metal rods and tools toward the water in a desperate attempt to scare the predator away. Ethan, his leg burning with pain, climbed as fast as he could, his hands slipping on wet metal. The shark struck again, this time at dangling ropes and equipment near the ladder, shaking them violently before turning away. Finally, Ethan pulled himself onto the platform, collapsing against the deck, gasping for breath as his crewmates surrounded him. Below, the shark continued to circle, its powerful tail slicing through the water, testing the edges of the structure before slowly retreating into the deep. The ocean surface settled once more, but the mark of the attack, blood on steel and torn gear, remained as proof of how close he had come to disaster. Ethan lay on the hot metal floor, his body trembling as the pain in his leg pulsed with every heartbeat. The crew acted quickly, tearing strips from cloth and wrapping them around the bleeding wound. The metallic scent of blood mixed with oil and salt in the heavy air. The once calm morning had turned into chaos, and every man on deck knew how close they had come to witnessing something far worse. The surface of the sea, which had been still moments before, was now marked by streaks of red slowly fading into the waves. The shark had vanished, but the fear it left behind stayed sharp in everyone's mind. One of the crew members ran to the radio to call for help. A supply vessel nearby received their message and began moving toward them. Ethan's breathing was fast and uneven, his leg throbbing as pressure was applied to slow the bleeding. The torn fabric around the wound was soaked in crimson, and his boot hung in shreds. The marks of the bite were deep, long, and uneven, clear signs of the immense power that had struck him. The men around him worked in silence, glancing often toward the edge of the platform as if expecting another shadow to rise from the water. The minutes felt endless before the rescue boat arrived. The crew carefully lifted Ethan onto a stretcher and lowered him to the smaller vessel below. The salty wind stung his face as he was carried across the waves toward the mainland. The adrenaline that had kept him alert began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and pain. Through blurred vision, he caught sight of the rig shrinking in the distance, standing tall above the same waters that had nearly taken his life. At the medical station on shore, doctors cleaned and stitched his leg. The cuts were severe but had missed major arteries. He would recover, though the scars would remain as a reminder of the attack. The medical team noted the precision of the wounds, typical of a bull shark, a predator known for its power and aggression, especially in cloudy or shallow water. Marine specialists later explained that vibrations from the maintenance equipment might have drawn the shark close, mistaking movement for prey. Word of the incident spread quickly through the offshore community. Workers across the Gulf began reviewing safety protocols, reinforcing barriers, and limiting maintenance in murky water conditions. Some spoke of the attack with quiet fear, others with awe at how Ethan had survived such a direct strike. For Ethan himself, recovery was both physical and emotional. Nights were restless, filled with flashes of water, metal, and the dark shape rising beneath him. Weeks later, when he finally returned to work, the crew greeted him with cautious smiles. He walked with a slight limp, his leg still bandaged, but his determination was unchanged. Standing on the deck again, he stared at the calm sea stretching endlessly in every direction. Beneath that still surface, he knew, power and danger always waited unseen. The attack had not made him hate the ocean, only respect it more. The Gulf, beautiful and unpredictable, had reminded him that even experience and skill could not control nature's sudden fury. Ethan's story became a warning across the region, not one of fear, but of awareness. It showed how quickly calm could turn into chaos, and how survival often depended on instinct, courage, and the will to climb one more rung when everything around tried to pull you down. On the morning of September 12, 2023, the Pacific Ocean around Santa Catalina Island shimmered under a clear blue sky. 29-year-old Ethan Cole paddled out through the rolling surf, his board slicing smoothly across the calm water. Surfing had been part of his life since childhood, and this day felt perfect for testing his new high-speed board. Beside him was his closest friend, Tyler James, who had joined him on countless adventures over the years. Both men loved the challenge of the ocean, the mix of beauty and danger that came with each wave. Ethan was a skilled surfer and a trained ocean swimmer, known for his calm nature and quick reflexes. His new board gleamed under the sunlight, reflecting flashes of silver that caught the eye even from beneath the surface. Below them, however, the deep water concealed more than just sand and coral. The Pacific, though peaceful at the surface, was home to powerful predators always moving, always hunting. As Ethan rode a small wave, he felt a rush of speed and balance that thrilled him. The board responded perfectly, cutting through the swell. Tyler paddled a few yards away, watching with a grin as his friend adjusted his stance. But beneath the glittering water, a short-fin mako shark had noticed the flashes of light and the steady rhythm of splashing. Known for their lightning speed and curiosity, makos often followed unusual motion. This one was large, around 10 feet, and moved with silent precision. Ethan slowed to rest, stretching his legs in the cool sea. The water around him rippled gently. Then, without warning, a dark shape surged from below. The shark slammed into the tail of the board with violent force, its jaws clamping around the fiberglass. The impact threw Ethan sideways, the board flipping out from under him. As he hit the surface, pain seared through his calf where the shark's teeth had grazed flesh. Foam and spray filled his vision as he kicked instinctively, trying to stay upright. His heart pounded, the water around him churning. The mako circled back, sleek and fast, cutting through the surf like a torpedo. Its body glimmered silver blue as it darted closer, drawn by movement and blood. Tyler saw the commotion and paddled hard toward his friend. The shark rose again, snapping near Ethan's legs, its tail thrashing with raw energy. Tyler swung his board toward the predator, striking its side with the fin and splashing with his hands to break its focus. The mako darted around them, its sharp snout cutting through bubbles and whitewater before diving again. Ethan clung to his board, blood clouding the waves beneath him. He pulled himself halfway up as the predator made one last swift pass, brushing the board's underside. Then, almost as quickly as it had appeared, the shark vanished into the depths. The two men floated, gasping for air, surrounded by the restless sea that had nearly claimed one of them. Ethan stayed still for several seconds, the ocean's quiet returning slowly around him. His heartbeat was loud in his ears, and the salt water burned against the wound on his calf. The sea that had felt calm and welcoming only minutes ago now seemed endless and cold. He gripped the edge of his board tightly, afraid to let his legs drift too far beneath the surface. The faint shimmer below him reminded him that the predator could still be near, hidden in the deep blue shadows. Tyler floated beside him, scanning the waves for any sign of movement. The silence between them was filled only by the gentle roll of water and the soft crash of distant waves. The stillness made every ripple feel dangerous. Both men knew how fast a mako could strike, and the thought of it returning made their muscles tense. Blood still spread faintly around Ethan's leg, and they both knew that the best chance of survival was to move slowly back toward shore. They began paddling side by side, careful not to splash too much. Each stroke through the water felt heavy and slow. The coastline seemed far away, but the sound of breaking surf gave them hope. The pain in Ethan's leg grew sharper with each movement. The salt stung the open wound, but adrenaline kept him focused. Tyler stayed close, his board bumping gently against Ethan's, ready to help if he faltered. Halfway to the beach, a small wave lifted them. Both men froze, fearing the shadow might return. For a moment, the glint of the mako's fin appeared in the distance, cutting across the water before disappearing again into the dark. The sight pushed them to paddle harder despite the fatigue burning through their arms. The shore grew closer, the waves rising higher around them as the shallow water came into view. Lifeguards on the sand had already spotted them. A whistle echoed across the beach and a rescue jet ski raced toward their position. Tyler waved weakly, pointing toward Ethan's leg. Within minutes, the rescuers reached them, pulling Ethan onto the sled and speeding toward land. The cold air against his wet skin made him shiver, and the pain that had been dulled by shock now throbbed sharply through his body. Once on the beach, paramedics rushed to his side. Blood streaked his calf, but the wound was clean and deep rather than torn. They wrapped it tightly as curious onlookers gathered near the surf. The water, once clear, now carried faint trails of red that drifted back out to sea. Tyler sat beside his friend, drained and silent, watching the same ocean that had nearly taken his life. Later that evening, experts identified the marks as belonging to a short-fin mako, a species known for its speed and unpredictability. The bite had been more of a test than a full attack, an animal responding to motion and reflection rather than hunger. Still, the power behind that brief encounter was enough to leave deep scars and a lasting reminder of how thin the line was between adventure and danger. For days afterward, Ethan replayed the event in his mind. The flash of silver, the sudden force, and the feeling of being completely powerless in the vast sea he had always trusted. The incident changed how he viewed the ocean, not as an enemy, but as something to be fully respected. Though his injuries had healed, the memory remained, a silent lesson written in salt, water, and fear. On March 15, 2025, the sky above Gansby, South Africa, was painted with soft gold and blue as the morning sun reflected off the ocean's calm surface. The water stretched endlessly, smooth and inviting, with only gentle waves touching the shore. It was the perfect morning for the small paddleboard yoga group that gathered near a sheltered cove, where the sea was shallow and peaceful. Among them was Simone Jacobs, a 37-year-old fitness instructor renowned for her calm demeanor and affection for the ocean. She had spent years teaching yoga in coastal towns, combining her passion for balance and nature into one tranquil practice. Simone had moved to Gansby 2 years earlier, drawn by its natural beauty and sense of freedom. She believed in the healing power of water, and paddleboard yoga was her favorite way to connect with the sea. That morning she smiled as her students arranged their boards in a neat circle, their paddles resting across the front of each one. The salty air was cool, and seabirds drifted overhead. Beyond the calm surface, though, the coastline of Gansby hid a darker truth. It was a hunting ground for great white sharks drawn to the nearby seal colonies. The class began slowly, the participants shifting from kneeling to standing as they stretched toward the horizon. The rhythmic motion of the boards created small ripples that danced across the water. Everything felt peaceful. Beneath them, however, the deep blue began to stir. A large shadow glided through the cold water, powerful and patient. The predator had been following the vibrations for minutes, its senses alert to every sound and splash above. Simone balanced on her board, lowering herself into a plank position, her reflection shimmering beneath her. Without warning, a massive shape burst from below. The great white shark, nearly 20 feet long, erupted through the surface with astonishing speed and force. The impact shook the entire group. Simone's board cracked beneath her as the shark's jaws clamped around her torso. The power of the strike flipped her into the air before she crashed into the water. Panic spread instantly. The other boards rocked violently as students scrambled to stay upright. Splashes filled the air as they tried to pull away from the attack zone. The water turned turbulent as the predator thrashed, sending foam and blood across the surface. Simone struggled briefly before vanishing beneath the waves. Her board drifted away, half submerged, its white surface smeared with red streaks. The shark circled once more before disappearing into deeper water, leaving behind a scene of chaos and disbelief. The peaceful morning had turned in seconds into a nightmare that none of the witnesses would ever forget. The sea grew still again, broken only by the sound of panicked breathing and the gentle rocking of floating boards. The water that had once felt peaceful was now stained and disturbed, reflecting the shock of what had just happened. The yoga class drifted together, forming a small cluster of trembling bodies and scattered boards. Every face showed disbelief. Their calm morning turned into a nightmare. The surface rippled faintly as if hiding the chaos that had just occurred below. A rescue boat was already on its way after distress signals were sent from shore. Instructors and students clung to each other, their hands shaking as they tried to steady themselves. The sea around them carried faint traces of red that slowly spread and faded with each small wave. When the boat arrived, crew members pulled the remaining participants aboard, their eyes scanning the open water for any sign of Simone. The shark had vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only floating pieces of broken boards and a haunting silence behind. Hours passed before her body was found several hundred meters away. The sea that had once given her peace had taken her in an instant of raw, unstoppable power. The waves rolled gently as the rescue team lifted her from the water, their faces pale beneath the heavy afternoon light. Back on shore, the beach was cleared, and authorities marked off the area. Local divers surveyed the waters but found no trace of the predator. News of the tragedy spread quickly, reaching communities far beyond Gansby. Experts later explained that the combination of splashing, rhythmic board movement, and proximity to a seal colony had likely triggered the shark's predatory instinct. It was a case of mistaken identity, a moment when calm human activity had crossed paths with the instincts of an apex predator. The aftermath left a lasting mark on those who had witnessed it. Many of Simone's students abandoned paddleboard yoga altogether, unable to return to the water. A memorial was built near the beach, decorated with flowers and seashells, honoring a woman who had found her life's joy in the ocean. For the locals, it became a poignant reminder of how fragile safety can feel when nature reveals its true strength. The sea remained beautiful, but now it carried a shadow, one formed by memory loss and the reminder that even serenity can turn wild without warning.